Module 6, Lesson 3, creating a dot plot and a frequency table. So ICANN statements, I can create a dot plot for a given set of data. I can summarize a given set of data using equal length intervals and constructing a frequency table. And I can analyze a frequency table and describe the distribution. Looking at our 4 steps here that we're going to be looking at through this module, we are once again looking at steps 3 and 4. We're going to summarize data with a dot plot, but we're also going to add a frequency table. And we're going to use a dot plot, or what's also known as a line plot, and frequency table to answer questions about a set of data. Example number 1. Robert, a 6th grader at Roosevelt Middle School, usually goes to bed around 10 o'clock and gets up around 6 o'clock to get ready for school. That means he gets about 8 hours of sleep on a school night. He decided to investigate the statistical question, how many hours per night do 6th graders usually sleep when they have school the next day? So he's going to be collecting data. The data he's collecting will be the number of hours. This is numerical data. And he is expecting some variability because he's talking to a whole bunch of 6th graders, and he doesn't expect that they're all going to sleep the same number of hours every night. So Robert surveyed 29 6th grade students, and he collected all of this data, remembering that each one of these is a number of hours that the 6th graders sleep when they have school the next day. And right now, that just looks like a big pile of numbers, a big string of numbers. It doesn't tell me very much. And so Robert decided he's going to make a dot plot of this data to help him answer his statistical question. Remember, he's trying to find out about how many hours 6th graders usually sleep when they have school the next day. And so he's going to create a dot plot. Now, when we do a dot plot goes with a number line, which is why you will also hear it referred to as a line plot. So we draw a line, and he's going to label it from 5 to 12 to match the lowest and highest number of hours slept. So 5 is the lowest number, 12 is the highest number. So down here on the low part of the number line, he's going to put a 5, and on the upper part of the number line, he's going to put a 12. Now the question is, what goes in between? And it's very important when we do dot plots and line plots that we have equal intervals, meaning whatever we're going to count by remains the same. So I can't do 5, 6, and then skip, and I'll put an 8 here, and then skip, and I'll put a 12 here. We need to keep the intervals equal. We need to be counting by the same amount. We need to make sure that we have left a spot for all of the numbers. So some things to remember when creating a dot plot. We keep the space between the numbers the same. I don't want a 5 here and then we jump clear over and have a 6 and put a 7 very close. We want to try and make it look neat, tidy, uniform, and even. We're going to count by the same amount on the number line. I don't go 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 13. If I'm going to count by ones, count by ones. If I'm going to count by twos, count by twos, but I must be consistent. The other part is we need to label the dot plot. We need to share what is actually on this dot plot. So here is one way we could set up this dot plot. We've labeled it as the dot plot of the number of hours slept. Robert has counted by ones, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. He has labeled these numbers. This is the number of hours that have slept. Sorry, number of hours slept. And I suppose if we want to get picky, we could say by 6th graders. Now, once again, why is it labeled from 5 to 12? Because the low number on his data was 5. The high number was 12. Could we have labeled it from 0 to 15? What do you think about that? Well, yes, we could have. We could have started at 0, we could have gone to 15, and we could have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and of course my lines aren't spaced as well as they should be. We could have done that. The question would be, is it practical? Do we need to always start our number line at 0? And the answer is no. One advantage of going from 0 to 15 is if we added more people to our survey and we found out that there are some people who sleep no hours any night, we'd have a spot for them. If we found out that there are some people who sleep 15 hours, we would have a spot for them. But those seem to be unlikely. But we could have labeled from 0 to 15. Now, if we have no data for a particular value, do we have to show that value on the number line? For example, if our data is 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, and 10, can I just leave off the 5, 6, and 7? So could I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, and just skip the rest of it? And the answer to that question is no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to leave the spot there. That is how you are reporting that there was no data. So if I were going to set this up, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I would have to include the 5, 6, and the 7. I can't just skip over them. All right, so here is the dot plot, and in your exercise you need to complete the dot plot. I'll do a couple of them, and then to keep the video moving I'm going to advance to the next slide. So it says I've got a 7, so I'm going to cross out the 7 and I'm going to put a dot above the 7. It says I've got an 8, so I'll cross out the 8 and put an 8. Notice when I cross out that I just put a single line through. Sometimes I have to come back and double check my work, and it's nice to be able to read rather than scribbling things out. So I've got a 5, I've got 3 9s. Now if I have more than one of a number, I just keep adding dots going up. I've got 2 7s, and I'll complete this process for the entire data set. So this would be a time to pause the video and complete your data set. And when you have finished your data set, then unpause the video. All right, so here is exercise 2, and you can see I've got a completed dot plot ready to use to answer the questions. And the question we're going to answer first is, what are the least and most hours of sleep reported in the survey of 6th graders? So now we're looking at kind of the spread of the data. And we can look and say that we've got our least is 5 hours. And we can say that our most is 12 hours. Please remember to pause the video and answer the questions before I answer them. All right, let's take a look at exercise 3. Pause the video, read the question, write your answer, then unpause the video. What number of hours slept occurred the most often in the data set? Well, as I look at it, 9 hours occurred the most often. Pause the video, answer the question, then unpause the video. What number of hours of sleep would you use to describe the center of the data? Well, as I'm looking at this, I'm feeling like kind of this 8 and 9 hours is the center. Those two are definitely kind of the peak. I mean, if we want to look at this as kind of a mound, the peak is right in here, and it looks like 9 is really kind of the peak there. So I would probably say that the center is around 8 or 9. If somebody pushed me and said I could only pick one number, I'd say probably 9. Oop, come back here. There we go. Think about how many hours of sleep you usually get on a school night. How does your number compare with the number of hours of sleep from the survey of 6th graders? So this is where you would do a little bit of comparison. And each student's answer is going to be unique. However, you would probably say my hours of sleep are about the same. So you would say you're probably in that 8 or 9 range. You could say that your number of hours of sleep is more than what they usually get, or you could say your number of hours of sleep is less than what they usually get. All right, exercise 6. So here is a new data set. Robert went back and asked the question, how many hours do you sleep when you don't have school the next day? And so you need to go through and create a dot plot of this. So go ahead and pause the video and create your dot plot. And when your dot plot is complete, then unpause the video. Remember, you need your number line. Make sure you have your label for the title and make sure you have your label for the numbers. All right, so here is the dot plot. This would be a good time to pause and compare your dot plot with the dot plot here in the video. And when you're ready, we'll move on to the question. When there is no school the next day, what number of hours of sleep would you use to describe the center of the data? Now this is an interesting comparison. Before we looked and said the number of hours of sleep, kind of the center was 8 to 9 hours. Well, let's look at it now. I'm looking and seeing the center kind of more over here, this 10, 11, 12 hours, with 11 really kind of being the center. So when we have school the next day, the 6th graders are sleeping 8 to 9 hours. When they don't have school the next day, they're sleeping closer to 11 hours. What are the least and most number of hours slept with no school the next day reported in the survey? Well, our least is 5 hours, and the most is 13 hours. I hope you notice in all of these data sets that we keep looking at, we look at what is the low end, what is the high end, and how would we describe the center. We keep coming back to this over and over again. All right, make sure you pause, read the question, answer the question. Do students tend to sleep longer when they do not have school the next day than when they have school the next day? Explain your answer using the data in both dot plots. Now, I already kind of talked about this when I looked and said, well, on the other dot plot, they were sleeping 8 to 9 hours. That was kind of where our center was. And on this dot plot, we're seeing that the center is more in the 11 hours, or you could say 10 to 12 hours. So I would say that they tend to sleep more when they do not have school the next day. Based off of the data, based off of the center of the data of these two dot plots, they are sleeping about 2 to 3 hours more when they don't have school the next day. All right, example 2, building and interpreting a tally table, which is also known as a frequency chart or a frequency table. So they've got a statistical question. A group of 6th graders investigated the statistical question, how many hours per week do 6th graders spend playing a sport or an outdoor game? And here are the data students collected from a sample of 26 6th graders, showing the number of hours per week spent playing a sport or a game outside. So once again, we have this big just string of numbers, and it doesn't tell me very much. So we want to organize this in a way that we can interpret it, that it can make some sense for us. To help us organize the data, we're going to create a frequency table. A frequency table lists possible data values, so the responses, and how often each value occurs. That's why we call it a tally table. So to build a frequency table, first we're going to make 3 columns. We're going to label one column the number of hours playing a sport or a game. We're going to label the second column the tallies, and we're going to label the third column the frequency. And our rows are going to start with 0, and they're going to go to 12. 0 is our least, all the way up to 12 was our highest. So this would be a great time to pause the video and construct your table. And it should look something like this. So we've got our columns. Remember, columns run vertically. And then we've got our rows. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way down to 12. All right, so we're going to complete the tally mark column. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I'm going to carefully go through the data set, and I'm going to make tally marks for each number. So I've got a 3, so I've got 1, I've got a 2, I've got a 0, a 6, 3 3s, got a 1, got another 1, got some 2s, got an 8, got a 12, got 3 4s, 2 more 3s. So I've got 4 tally marks here. Now to make the tally marks easier to count, when we get to number 5, we cross. So I had 4, and now I've got 5, and then I add 1 more and I've got 6. So go ahead and finish up the tally marks here. And when you finish your tally marks, unpause the video. And hopefully your tally table looks something like this. And we go to exercise 11. And so for each number of hours, we're going to find the total number of tally marks, and we're going to place them in the frequency column. So now we're going to count up the tally marks. So for 0, I've got 3 tally marks, so I'd write a 3. For 1, I've got 4 tally marks, so I'd write a 4. For 2, I've got 5 tally marks, so I'd write a 5. So go ahead and record each of your tallies. For these that have nothing, we're going to put a 0. So go ahead and fill out your frequency column, and when you're ready, unpause the video. Go ahead and compare your tally chart, your tally table, your frequency chart, your frequency table. Hopefully your numbers match my numbers. And let's take a look at exercise 12. So now that we have a frequency chart, we could take this frequency chart, this information, these numbers here, these frequencies here, and we could create a dot plot. So go ahead and pause the video and create a dot plot or a line plot for the information on our tally table. And when you're ready, unpause the video. So there is a dot plot, and you can see that it runs 0 through 12, and you can see that there are dots that match our frequencies. We've got 3 dots for 0, we've got 4 dots for 1, 5 dots for 2. So the information is presented now 3 different ways. We have the tallies, we have the frequency, and we have the dot plot. Same data, 3 different representations. So what number of hours would you say describes the center of this data? Well, this would be a time to pause, take a look at the data, and think about it and say, well, kind of where is the middle here? Well, as I look at it, I find that the middle is somewhere in this 2 to 3 range. Now, I probably lean more towards 3 because even though this stuff is way spread out, there's a pretty good chunk there. I've still got a pretty good amount of data. So I've got quite a bit over here, I've got quite a bit over here, and then I look and say, okay, this is kind of also the biggest response. But I could live with anything in the 2 to 3 range and say that that's the center, but I lean a little bit towards the 3 being the center, because it feels like by the time I take this and include this, that I'm really kind of there in the middle. So how many of the sixth graders reported that they spend 8 or more hours a week playing a sport or playing outdoors? Pause the video, think, count when you're ready, then go along. Only 2 sixth graders reported they spent 8 or more hours. And it says 8 or more, so 8 is included, and I've only got these 2 people at 8 hours and at 12 hours. The sixth graders wanted to answer the question, how many hours do sixth graders spend per week playing a sport or playing an outdoor game? So we are once again kind of asking this question is, what is the typical? What is the center? What is the usual? And we're right back now looking at this concept of where is the center. Well, it's kind of around this 2, 3, and 4. In the middle of that is the 3 hours. So I could describe it as saying most sixth graders spend 2 to 4 hours. I could say most sixth graders spend about 3 hours. Either answer is a reasonable explanation of the center. I do kind of like the 2, 3, and 4 because it shows that it's not just the 3 here. We kind of have this big cluster right here in the middle of 2, 3, and 4 students, 2, 3, and 4 hours. All right, so quick closing here. Can you skip numbers on the number line used for a dot plot? Can I go 1, 2, 3, 5, 9, 12 and just leave the zeros off? And we've already been over this. The answer is no, you can't do that. We have to include all the numbers. Now, could I do something like this? I could absolutely do that, but I need to give a little mark there for the numbers in between. So I've left my spot for 1, I've left my spot for 3, I've left my spot for 5. So I'm counting by a nice interval here, counting by 2s, but I'm leaving the spot for the numbers in between. What are the 3 columns that we include in a frequency table? Stop and think about your frequency table. What were the 3 columns? The first column, we had all of our possible values between the smallest and largest data value. The second column was our tally column, and the third column was our frequency, which was the total number of tallies for each of the data values. All right, so as we wrap up the lesson, hopefully you're feeling okay creating a dot plot for a given set of data. Hopefully you can summarize the data with the equal length intervals. As you make your line, hopefully you can keep things equally separated, making sure you're not skipping things. Hopefully you can construct a frequency table to represent your data. And probably out of all of these, once you've done these first 2, this third one's probably the most important. Can you analyze what's going on here? Can you talk about what is the lowest value? Can you talk about the highest value? Can you identify where the center is and give a reason for the center? This starts to get into the interpretation of the data. What is the data telling me? Which is an important concept. So that concludes Module 6, Lesson 3. Hopefully you took the time to complete the exercises as we went through. Now that you're finished, you'll probably want to work on your problem set, complete any other assignments that your teacher may have for you.